Franklin D. Roosevelt, Rising in Politics. Chapter 1. A Sudden Collapse. It was August 1921. Franklin was 39 years old and vacationing with his family at their summer home on Campobello Island in Canada. The sun shone on the harbor. The air smelled of salt and pine. Franklin had spent the day swimming in the cold water and walking the rocky paths. He felt healthy, strong, ready for anything. But the next morning, something changed. Franklin woke with chills, his body trembling. A fever burned through him, and he felt strange. His legs felt heavy, numb. The world seemed distant and cold. When he tried to stand, his legs wobbled like sticks. Terror gripped him. "What is happening?" he thought, as the ground slipped away beneath him. Doctors came. One said it was a strong cold. Another suspected a blood clot. But soon, an expert, Dr. Robert Lovett, delivered quieter news. Franklin had what was then called infantile paralysis, polio. The disease had struck swiftly, cruelly. It had taken not just his strength, but perhaps his future. The joy of the vacation vanished. Franklin lay in a bed made for him in the Campobello cottage. The walls felt smaller now, the sunlight sharper. He could not walk. He could barely move. Pain seized his legs. He worried about losing control of other parts of his body. The doctors warned of serious dangers: urinary infections, blood clots, sores from lying too long. Franklin lay in silence, the fear and uncertainty pressing down on him like the waves against the island's shore. In those first hours, Franklin's world shrank to the present moment. The hushed voices of doctors, the white sheets, Eleanor's scent in the air. Eleanor refused to leave his side. She bathed him, shaved him, even aided him day and night when no nurse had yet arrived. Her hands worked with steady kindness, quiet love. She was the anchor in a sea of fear. Franklin fought to stay present. He remembered his father's words. Steady spirit is greater than strong body. Did that still hold true? He closed his eyes and held on to that thought. He could not walk, but perhaps he could still hold on inside. Time crawled by. At first his legs remained silent, cold, numb, distant. Then, in small ways, sensation returned. The road to healing promised to be long. Weeks turned into months. Franklin trained his damaged body with small movements. At home in New York, he began gentle exercises under the guidance of a physiotherapist. He was fitted with heavy steel braces that locked at the knee, and learned to stand again with the help of crutches. He practiced in short sessions, sometimes moving across a room, tasting freedom again. Though Franklin still could not walk freely, he refused to be defined by paralysis. He returned to reading, to thinking, to planning. He rebuilt his inner strength even as his body recovered. A new chapter in his life was beginning, not shaped by ease, but by resolve. Chapter 2. Darkness and Resolve. After Franklin was diagnosed with polio in August 1921 at Campobello Island, his world contracted into a small room made of fear and pain. The strong man who once swam in the icy water now lay motionless, unable to feel his legs. Each breath was heavy. Each moment carried the weight of loss and doubt. Franklin's family was close. Eleanor stayed at his bedside, bathing him, holding his trembling hands, whispering encouragement. His mother, Sarah, though quiet, watched with deep concern. Lewis Howe, his political aide and friend, kept the outside world at bay, turning away any hint of pity or pity-driven headlines. Day by day, the paralysis spread. Franklin's body became a silent battlefield. He faced not just physical pain, but emotional darkness. The fear that he might never walk again, the dread that his dreams were slipping away. Yet even in despair, a part of him remained unbroken. A thought echoed in his mind. Steady spirit is greater than strong body. His father's voice lived in that memory. As the days inched forward, each small sign of recovery became a quiet triumph. A finger moved. A tingle returned to his legs. The doctors found little to hold on to, but Franklin held on to hope. Winter came, and with it a slow routine of therapy. Under the watchful care of a physiotherapist, Franklin learned to balance on metal leg braces locked at the knee. He practiced standing, shored up by crutches, and the arms of a nurse or family member's steady support. Each movement hurt, but each step, no matter how small, was victory. Months passed in concentrated effort. Some days were better than others, some brought frustration. Yet Franklin persisted. He became not just a patient, but a symbol of resolve. He refused to allow polio to define him. He resumed reading important letters. He studied speeches from his longshore desk. He thought again of politics, of service. Toward spring, Roosevelt was moved to New York for further rehabilitation. He practiced walking across his long driveway under snow, once, twice, 3 times. He never made the full walk again, but the attempt, each trembling, wobbly step, was a declaration, "I will not yield." Eleanor and Louis Howe continued to shield him from the press, orchestrating his return to the public eye. At first, Roosevelt visited Washington in a wheelchair, hidden by careful angles and staging. Gradually, he practiced standing at a podium, leaning on both legs or a single cane, delivering short speeches with dignity. In those dark months, Roosevelt's spirit transformed. From the depths of his body's betrayal, he found inner resolve. The body was wounded, but the soul remained unbroken. Chapter 3. Warm Springs, a Place of Healing. In the autumn of 1924, 3 years after his sudden collapse, Franklin arrived at Warm Springs, Georgia. The journey south was long, but more difficult was the quiet question in his heart. Could this place truly heal me? Eleanor stood close by his side. The train rocked gently, and Franklin felt both fear and hope rise inside him. He had come because of a simple story. A young man had found relief in the warm, mineral-rich water of this small resort. Franklin hoped he might find the same. The water flowed from rocks on Pine Mountain, held warmth like a friend's hand, and never cooled even when the air turned crisp. He first arrived at the resort in early October. The house was modest, worn by time, but welcoming. That first night he could not sleep. The roof was thin, and he heard squirrels scratching above him. The sounds grounded him. He remembered he was alive, and he had a job to do. The next morning, Franklin entered the pool for the first time. The water held him up. It was warm, steady, and strangely alive. He moved in the water slowly, one hand, one foot, one breath at a time. The next day he stood upright in 4 feet of water. For the first time in years, he could feel his right leg respond. It was a quiet miracle. Every day, Franklin walked the small paths around the resort, greeting locals and farmers. He began to sense the world beyond his illness. Some of these people lived in homes with no electricity, no water pipes, no possibility of medical care. He felt both sorrow and resolve growing in him. He named the kindness and simplicity of this place the spirit of Warm Springs. News of his improvement spread. Newspapers carried stories and photographs of a tentative step, his right leg's lean. Polio patients across the nation saw a glimmer of their own possibility in that image. They began to come, drawn to the waters, to the hope of healing. Within 2 years, Franklin took bold action. In 1926, he purchased the resort and surrounding lands, over 1,000 acres, and organized the Georgia Warm Springs Foundation in 1927 to transform the property into a rehabilitation center. The foundation became the first hospital in the world devoted entirely to polio rehabilitation. Therapists worked with patients in the warm pools, helping them relearn movement, breathing, and balance. Franklin became not just a patient, but a host, a guide, and a friend to many who had suffered as he had. Year by year, Franklin returned to Warm Springs, sometimes secretly, sometimes overtly. He called it his sanctuary. He knew those waters did not cure polio, but they offered something deeper: courage, solidarity, and the chance to rebuild. As he walked, still with braces and crutches, he began to speak of public service again. The sense of rural poverty he witnessed in Georgia became a seed for many ideas. He thought of relief and reform for the country he loved. Warm Springs was healing his body, but also nurturing a new vision for his life. Warm Springs became both his refuge and his classroom. In its quiet waters, Franklin relearned his strength. In its simple village, he reconnected with the common people's lives. In that healing, his resolve returned, not only to reclaim his steps, but also to reclaim his place in public service. He was not yet ready for politics, but Warm Springs was preparing him. Chapter 4. Learning to Stand Again. Franklin returned to Warm Springs each year, not just as a patient, but as a student of his own strength. With the warm water cradling him, he began to relearn how to stand and how to believe in the possibility of movement again. When he first arrived in October 1924, he felt his right leg tremble. He later recalled how, for the first time in 3 years, he was able to stand in 4 feet of water. That moment was more than physical. It was the beginning of hope, a small triumph that crackled inside him. Each morning, Franklin stepped into the pool. The water was warm, steady, supportive. He would lean on a rail or a therapist's hand, lift one leg, then the other. Pain came in waves, but so did tiny sparks of movement. Slowly, kneeling turned to standing, standing to wobbly steps in the water. Out of the water, movement came in small bursts with the help of braces and crutches. Outside the pool, Franklin practiced his 2-point walk, balancing on a cane in one hand and holding someone's arm with the other, swiveling his torso with each step. Each tentative step was an act of defiance, against paralysis, against fear, against the urge to give up. He spent much of 1925 to 1928 in rehabilitation, both at Warm Springs and at home. According to one source, between 1925 and 1928, Franklin would spend more than half his time, 116 of 208 weeks, away from home, struggling to find a way to regain his feet. Eleanor and Louis Howe supported him gently from afar. They kept his political world alive, even as his body worked to move again. At Warm Springs, Franklin's efforts were contagious. He watched other patients learning to stand, to smile, to trust again. He cheered at small victories: a man walking with braces, a child learning to balance. Around him he saw that healing was not only physical, but spiritual. The place pulsed with shared determination. By 1926, Franklin had done more than learn to stand. He bought the resort and its hundreds of acres, redeeming it from decline and committing to its future as a place of healing. In 1927, he set up the Georgia Warm Springs Foundation, turning Warm Springs into the world's first hospital devoted solely to polio rehabilitation. Inside the buildings that replaced the old inn, therapists worked alongside patients, teaching exercises in pools, halls, and therapy rooms. Georgia Hall was built to serve polio sufferers directly, paid for by nickels and dimes from ordinary Georgians, a tribute to community and compassion. Franklin never regained full freedom of movement, but each year at Warm Springs, walking, even for a few steps, became his quiet victory. The landscape he loved, the gentle warmth of the springs, the courage of fellow patients. Together, these nurtured his resolve. In those moments, Franklin rediscovered not just his own body's strength, but his purpose. He was a leader, not just of others, but of himself. As he stood, brace-supported, crutch-assisted, he carried something more powerful than his legs, a spirit unbroken, ready to rise again. Chapter 5. Building a Center for Others. Franklin had learned to stand again, slowly, painfully, but with deep purpose. Yet his healing at Warm Springs sparked a greater idea. This place could heal not just him, but many others. By 1926, Franklin had invested a large part of his own money to purchase the resort and surrounding land, an area of over 1,000 acres. Turn 0 search 4, turn 0 search 1. The property included the old Meriwether Inn and the therapeutic spring pools, lying quietly amid the Georgia hills. In 1927, he took a bold step. He founded the Georgia Warm Springs Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to treating polio victims. Turn 0 search 1, turn 0 search 7, turn 0 search 9. Franklin wanted Warm Springs to be more than his private retreat. He envisioned it as a place of renewal and compassion, a center where others could learn to walk again. Disease and loneliness often isolate sufferers, but at Warm Springs, Franklin insisted the approach be different. Patients arrived not as patients, but as comrades. They walked into warm pools, leaned on terraces, and supported one another with shared courage. He called it the Spirit of Warm Springs, a simple force born of community and empathy. Turn 0 search 0, turn 0 search 1. Georgia Hall was built a few years later, a safe, accessible building with therapy rooms, a warm in-water pool, and a cafeteria where Roosevelt would host Thanksgiving meals for patients and staff. Turn 0 search 1, turn 0 search 22. The old crumbling inn was torn down, replaced with structures suited to polio survivors' needs. Turn 0 search 4, turn 0 search 22. Franklin also tapped into a broader movement. In 1938, he co-founded the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, which later became famous as the March of Dimes. Turn 0 search 8, turn 0 search 25. With simple campaigns, birthday balls, public radio appeals, Americans across the nation pooled their small coins to fund treatment and research. Soon, the March of Dimes made breakthroughs possible, leading to the development of the polio vaccine by Jonas Salk in the 1950s, saving millions of lives. Meanwhile, Franklin continued to return to the Springs, even while leading the nation as president. He often stayed at the Little White House, a cottage built in 1932 in Warm Springs, where he could rest, think, and keep working behind his braces and cane. Turn 0, search 4, turn 0, search 2, turn 0, search 22. It was his sanctuary, yet also a headquarters for compassion and progress. Warm Springs transformed from a private healing spot to an institution of public hope. Franklin's journey to stand again had indeed become a path that helped thousands stand too. He turned personal pain into social purpose, forging an enduring legacy of care, strength, and community. Chapter 6. Public Return. Years had passed since Franklin fell ill. The world remembered the confident young politician, now transformed by struggle. But in 1924, something significant stirred again. FDR quietly returned to public life. At the Democratic National Convention that summer, held in New York City, the convention floor buzzed with excitement. Delegates called out, speeches echoed, banners swayed. In the middle of the crowd, a familiar voice rose. "Alfred E. Smith." Then, unexpected, another voice followed. Franklin D. Roosevelt, nominating Smith for president. It was not just a name, it was a signal that Franklin had come back. The crowd saw not a broken man, but a steady voice, a steady presence. Many were surprised. How could he speak so clearly, with strength in his words, when his body had been tested so harshly? The answer lay not in spectacle, but in resolve. Franklin's return was cautious and calculated. He did not stride onto the stage. He emerged slowly, using braces and a cane, often concealed by thoughtful staging. Backstage, his allies, Eleanor, Lewis Howe, and his private secretary, Missy LeHand, coordinated each detail: the angle of a foot, the position of a hand, the lighting on his face. Every step was planned to convey strength, not weakness. In 1928, he ran for governor of New York. The race was close, the expectations low. How could a paralyzed man, half hidden behind braces, compete? But Franklin and his team were determined. Campaigns took him across the state. At events, he would lean on his cane, stand with care, and speak with quiet confidence about hope, recovery, and public service. New Yorkers saw not pity, but possibility. They saw a leader who had not only weathered suffering, but transformed it into strength. Inside the world of cameras and public appearances, a soft veil of secrecy remained. Few photographs captured Roosevelt in a wheelchair or with his braces clearly visible. Reporters and the press cooperated, either by habit or respect. Yet recently discovered footage, like one from an Easter egg roll in 1935, briefly shattered the illusion. The clip shows Roosevelt walking shakily with the help of a bodyguard and a cane. History remembers it as a deeply human moment, although at the time such images were rare. In 1928, Franklin won the race and became governor of New York. It was a moment of triumph for a man many had counted out. He walked the corridors of Albany under support, but with steady resolve. His voice carried ideas of reform, empathy for the struggling, and a belief that leadership meant serving, not simply winning. His public return wasn't a dramatic unveiling. It was a quiet, powerful re-entry, step by careful step. He stood before the public not to ask for pity, but to offer hope. That hope carried him forward, to Harvard, to World War, to the presidency. Chapter 7. Foundation of Hope. Nearly 2 decades had passed since Franklin's body was paralyzed by polio. Yet from that suffering grew a force greater than any physical strength, his spirit of service. In 1938, that spirit took shape as the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis. Soon the world would know it as the March of Dimes. It began quietly, born from Roosevelt's own struggle. He understood the fear of parents holding their children, wondering if they would limp or laugh again. FDR knew this fear firsthand, and it pushed him to act far beyond his own recovery. The foundation launched on January 3, 1938, with FDR's careful guidance. Though his legs trembled with braces hidden from public view, his voice did not falter. The goal was bold: to unite ordinary Americans in a common cause, eradicating polio through research, rehabilitation, and empathy. Even in the Great Depression, he invited everyone to be a part. The name March of Dimes came from a comedian, Eddie Cantor. He called upon Americans to send their dimes to the White House, a gift small in cost but mighty in purpose, a dime's power multiplied by millions. And the idea soared. In just 2 days, letters filled with dimes, 2,680,000 of them, arrived at the president's desk. It was called a silver tide that flooded hope into the nation. With that momentum, Basil O'Connor, Roosevelt's close friend and aide, helped guide the foundation's mission. He led a vast network of volunteers, local chapters, and donors, building an organization that spread from Washington to small towns across America. Funds flowed, enough to support research labs, clinics, and rehabilitation centers, including Warm Springs. The foundation backed the work of scientists like Jonas Salk, who would soon develop life-saving vaccines. The March of Dimes became a national movement. It stood for hope, for healing, and for the idea that a nation could heal together. It transformed the story of a man's paralysis into a story of collective power. 15 key words. 1. Politics. Work and activities connected to government and making laws. Example: Franklin studied politics to understand how to help people and make change. 2. Ambition. A strong wish to achieve something important. Example: his ambition to serve the country grew stronger after college. 3rd campaign. A series of actions to win an election. Example: Franklin worked hard during his first political campaign in New York. 4. Speech. Words spoken to a group of people. Example: he gave a speech to explain his ideas about helping farmers. 5. Debate. A formal discussion of different opinions. Example: Franklin joined a debate about how to improve the economy. 6. Public. Relating to all the people of a place. Example: he wanted to work for the public good, not just for himself. 7. Reform. A change made to improve a law or system. Example: Franklin talked about reform to protect workers and families. 8. Confidence. The feeling of being sure of yourself. Example: each successful meeting gave him more confidence as a young leader. 9. Support. Help or approval from others. Example: local farmers gave their support when he promised fair prices. 10. Challenge. A difficult task that tests skill or courage. Example: running for office was a big challenge, but Franklin did not give up. 11. Opportunity. A chance to do something good. Example: a vacancy in the state Senate gave him the opportunity to begin his political life. 12. Influence. The power to change people's opinions or actions. Example: his clear ideas began to influence other young politicians. 13. Responsibility. A duty to take care of something or someone. Example: winning an election gave him the responsibility to represent his district. 14. Speechwriter, a person who helps prepare formal talks. Example, Franklin sometimes worked with a speechwriter to shape his messages. 15. Leadership, the ability to guide and inspire people. Example, early in his career, Franklin showed leadership by uniting different groups for a common goal.